I feel like we have more people here than we do at council meetings, so thank you very much for showing up. I appreciate everybody showing up. We do have two council members. Councilmember Haynes is ill this evening, he won't be able to be here, and Councilman Rhines is doing what I appreciate, because I always say family first. He is at baseball practice right now, so he may get here in time to join us. I know we like to keep to a nice and tidy hour when we meet, so that it doesn't take up a lot of people's time away from their families. But thank you all very much for coming. Before I turn it over to John, we'll just do very quick introductions. I think everybody around here in the room knows each other, but Tammy Gilroy, Mayor, City Council.
City Council. Terry Anderson, City Council.
Steve Jenkins, City Council.
Kevin Smuziak, President.
Jim Carr, President.
Narda Murphy, DDA, President.
Earl Wolf, Parks and Recreation Commission.
Todd Mead, Treasurer. Ray Schmidt, Public Works.
Jeff Weiss, Police Department.
Scott Van Osburg, City Council.
Holly Thompson, City Clerk.
I was here for the free food, but there's none, so John Hannafan, City Manager. Thanks for everybody for joining us again. This is an annual visiting session. This is really the start of our budget process for the upcoming fiscal year. I mean, we still have several months to go in the current year, but this is really how we start things off. It's important to remember in the visioning session, and again, partly because I have the controls and help set the agenda, I tend to do a lot of the talking, but this is not my vision. It's intended to be all of our vision, and that includes the community, and that's why we do this. We're not making any decisions on any of the items tonight. We'll do that as part of the budget preparation and ultimately the budget adoption. But really, it's a method, and every year I ask this question. I've been doing this kind of the same format for about the last 20 years or so, and because I've been doing it for 20 years, sometimes I think that, yeah, Terry, you are right, it is death by PowerPoint sometimes, but I want to make sure that when there's plenty of time for folks to interact, and then also, when we come to a conclusion of this, if there's any thoughts or comments, and they don't have to be tonight, but if there's ways to make the session better, certainly open to that. So just kind of move forward through the agenda. And a lot of these are repeats, because a lot of these items are, have a profound impact on our budget every year. So we'll talk about utilities. Zoning and code enforcement is a new one this year. So we'll talk about that. Employee retention, certainly important. Economic development, streets, sidewalks. New and regional opportunities, our department updates. All of our department heads are here. And then key dates in the process. So we start with utilities because other than public safety, if we don't have clean water and a safe and clean and hygienic way to deal with wastewater, nothing works. Not for our residents, not for our businesses, not for future residents or future businesses. And when I was hired by all of you, thank you for that, utilities was one of the primary issues that council members talked about being a focus for us. So we'll start with utilities. And this is sort of a standard slide that we use every year, and I'm not going to read all the items on there, but I like to think that we do a good job with all of these things. Most of them are required to do by law. Like we have an annual water reliability study. We have daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annual monitoring for wastewater and water, frankly. So I think we do a good job with that. And the one time that we did raise rates here in Williamston, I mean, we communicated that, we had a public hearing, we had multiple work sessions on that, so I think whether you agree with the outcome or not, we at least we're certainly transparent about it. So, way back when, there was a project plan for the wastewater plant, and we know, and we had to approve an emergency boiler repair on Monday. The plant is aging. It's serving us well. I mean, we're certainly in compliance with everything. But we do have some key elements as we move forward to the next fiscal year that we have to address. And we've talked about the UV disinfectant system before. And those of you that have been at council since I've been here, some of the themes repeat. We haven't forgotten that, but that's an expensive item. And we're going to, much like we did with the federal funds that we received from, at the time, Congresswoman Slotkin's office through her We'll be attempting to get a congressional or a Senate allocation for the wastewater plants. They're still doing that, and I'm not going to get into the national politics of things, but there was a massive conference call with basically everybody in the state that the senator had a couple weeks ago, and that shockingly, senators on both sides and Congress people on both sides of the aisle still like getting money for their district, so they fully expect that the congressional allocations and the Senate allocations will be available. And how that process works is there's a short form you have to put together for your project, and then it gets thrown in the hopper with all the other projects, and if you make the first cut, you kind of advance on it. It's kind of like American Idol in a way, so at some point you got to solo and perform, but we will be submitting again this year for wastewater projects. Water main projects, we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. With the wastewater distribution system, we're going to talk about this a little bit more in depth tonight too. Inflow and infiltration is water, river water, storm water that makes its way into the sewer system through manholes, through cracks in H pipes. I mean, every community has I&I. Our community isn't any worse than anywhere else, especially for having a river running right through it. But if you can, we're going to propose in the next budget, or even before that, really at the next council meeting, to do an I&I study to get an idea. We know, like from flow meters at the wastewater plant, especially like this time of year with the massive snow melt and the river is raging and all that water downstream is coming our way, our wastewater plant capacity is challenged because of what's called I&I. We think with the projects that we recently did with Williams and Lloyd and North Putnam, that will help. We think that data will bear out this spring, but we're talking about, our plan is about 0.68 MGD, which is million gallons per day. And during high flow months, we can see as much as 2 to 3 million gallons in peak time. Now we're able to treat it, but that's, again, long term, if we figure out the I&I problem and we're treating less like storm water, then that's less that we have to put into the plant, and it's less that we have to treat.
When you say challenge, it's not beyond what we can handle.
It hasn't been yet, but it's we have good operators. If it is, then we end up violating our permit, and
The water goes in without being treated.
correct.
But that hasn't
That has not, fortunately. So some of the projects that we've recently completed, and this, if you look at the list here, we've been working off the same list from 2023. I haven't really updated it other than to show that we did do Putnam, we did do Lloyd, we did do Williams, and we did water and sewer mains on all three of those streets. We're a little bit, I guess, behind the calendar schedule for things. Next up, proposed is the crossing for at Cedar Street, where Cedar Street that ends by St. Mary's, it crosses over to Riverside, and then the alley project behind Tavern 109 and those businesses. At one point, the utilities were replaced, the water main was replaced on 3 of the 4 corners in downtown. I don't know why the 4th corner wasn't done, but it wasn't. So the infrastructure continues to be replacing. So these are HUD-funded projects. We are still waiting for the Williams and Lloyd money to come in. You know, I've had great discussions with the project, the grant managers for HUD recently, and like everything else in the federal government, that money was paused for a time, but because it's from the 2022 congressional budget, I mean, the money's still there. I mean, our grant agreement's still good, and the money's still forthcoming, but things were slowed down a little bit. And they were slowed a little bit recently with some of the shuffling of the staff there, but in the end, the money's there. So as soon as we have those funds, and again, we have until 2030 to expend that $3 million. It's not going to take that long. The worst impact that could happen is that we decide, because it gets later in the year, because it's a cash flow issue, that we don't do Red Cedar in the alley this construction season, that we do in 2026. So, but these projects were picked these are the main problem areas. They're the older parts of town for the most part. And they're also in areas that historically might have had more of the water main breaks. So. Any questions so far? And I know I get it over time, some of these things are redundant. I don't agree with the statement completely, but I used to work for people who said that government should be boring, you know, that it should be somewhat repetitive, especially if you're good at what you do, and then you kind of like stay between the lines all the time. So that's why some of this may be repetitive.
What would be the next project that we would want to put forward for the MDOT? Because we know that that cycles every 2 to 3 years, that there's money available. So we did our MDOT project back in '23, which means we should be coming up on something. Do we have anything that would qualify for MDOT?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So that's actually, we're part of what's called the small urban area, and it's federal pass-through dollars that come from MDOT. Those have to be expended on major streets. The logical one, Church is a major street, so that would be the logical one. The money for us would become available in 2027, 2028.
Okay, all right.
So, and to give you, it was about $400,000 that we received, and we used that for the North Putnam project. It can only be for the road, it can't be for any utilities.
Right,
But that would, to me, that would make the most sense.
okay. So that would go on our list as we're growing it, so we'll see, we can see that potentially on our slide. in the future.
Correct, that's right. Yep.
All right.
So the federal money is taking longer to come in than we expected. So the city has had to float that money.
Correct, yep.
Is this having a serious impact on cash flow for the city?
No, I wouldn't say it's, no, I mean, we're in really good financial shape. We're just not in a position to launch into any like large-scale water or wastewater projects. And we have money to certainly operate the utility and, you know, pay the bills and treat stuff and, you know, heaven forbid, we have to replace another boiler, because I think we're fresh out of new boilers. This is the second one since I've been here, but it's more for like the larger projects.
Since we're talking about streets, can you get, I know we had I hate saying it, and I'm gonna not, but we did have a water main break, down on South Putnam. What are the barricades up on High Street for right now?
Ray, do you want to answer that one?
Over on
On
High
High
Street,
Street?
Ray? Between Cedar and Water Street, what are the barricades over on High Street right now for?
I guess I'm not aware there.
Just drove by it today.
It's
You got Jan put up barricades down the street from our office on High Street.
Oh, there was we worked on a driveway apron there where
Okay.
the frost had heaved up the asphalt.
Oh, okay.
So,
All right.
yeah, we put them up Block Street temporarily to, I don't know, put a patch on it for now. We gotta wait till the frost comes all the way out. And then I added it to the list to the WMBs, as I call them. I don't like saying the name.
That's okay, I did.
But,
So,
yeah, so I added that section right there to be patched when we patch our spring
okay,
WMB asphalt.
all right, thank you.
And that's the other thing, like, when, unfortunately, those tend to happen in the winter, and you can't, you can, you know, cold patch them or patch them, but you can't, you know, pave patch them, and so we have a list, and they're not just for areas where the WMEs have happened, there's other areas in town, like, that's a good example.
Right.
There's some on School and South that we know we're gonna have to do, because, again, we're not in a position, we can't, in a perfect world, we would, you know, pave all the streets every year, all the time, but, you know, we with 15 miles of streets, not counting Grand River, because that's the state of Michigan's road, there's a lot to do every year, and we need to start on it. We've been on a schedule now, and we need to continue on the schedule. Yes?
We got some cash in the bank for doing crack sealing in the spring here?
Yep, we budget for that every year now as part of like annual maintenance, both for major and local. Yeah. It's kind of it for utilities. We'll come back to streets. On Monday, we talked about, you know, targeting in on a couple. So we'll move forward to the next slide. So part of the reason I put this on here is one of our newer council members, Mr. Haynes, who couldn't make it tonight, was consistently had asked about code enforcement and doing a code enforcement review, and perhaps we can, take his reign in the future. But just for the sake of folks that are here, we do code enforcement. We don't have a code enforcement officer hired. Frankly, we don't have enough issues like that to justify the cost of hiring someone. And code enforcement is really a shared activity amongst all of us that work here, whether it's public works, the police officers. Chief Weiss and I today were out just because it was time for us to do it this week, to check on a couple of areas that we've sent letters. Folks tend to, there tends to be the same properties that are in violation, year after year, season after season. But we do issue code enforcement letters to them. We haven't had to do this since I've been here, which is someone's non-compliant, like for trash or their lawn, where we'll have to go in and do that work. Like we'll have public works there, and then folks get plenty of opportunity to come in compliance. And again, going back to the 7 of you, but 6 of you are here when you hired me. We talked about code enforcement, but as a way of, we want to be, we don't want to be lax. We don't want to let people just do whatever they do, but we want to be a fair community, and that aligns personally with how I feel about it. But we send out, I don't know, probably 20 or 30, I would call them like major code letters a year. Things like cutting the grass. I mean, you could have just been gone for 2 weeks and then it rained for a week and your grass is too long. But we'll send reminder letters for that as well. So beyond that, I mean, I don't have anything to add. On the other side, I do want to talk about rental inspections, but I don't know if anybody wants to talk more about code enforcement. We talked about it in a couple council meetings, generally, but...
Well, one of the examples Jen gave was that someone had been in violation and the city wanted to talk to them. And they said, well, so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so are also in violation. And I mean, assuming it was complaint-based, you would have to investigate all those, follow them down, right? Is that how you?
Oh, yeah.
But that's apparently not happening.
And I think it's fair to say that, I mean, unless it's an obvious infraction, like, I know that there's like no parking on the streets from March to April. Our police department does a fabulous job of that. But there's also, did you know that you can't leave your car in the same spot on the street for more than 48 hours? I mean, there's all of these different little, ordinances that we have, and it does become complaint-based. And I think our staff does a very good job of following up on it, giving whoever the complaint is against an opportunity to give an answer, what the circumstances were behind it. And if our city staff has to take action, then that just means they're doing their job. And so, I also think too that if it becomes a situation where a resident is continually, making a complaint about a neighbor or something, there's something deeper going on, and I feel like our city staff has a way to help diffuse those types of situations and scenarios too. I know I gave my ordinance book to Terry. I was just going to ask him, are you done reading it yet?
Oh, no, I'm not done yet.
Okay.
But thank you for,
Reminding you that you need to finish?
yeah.
Just kidding.
I was on a walk once and there was a young guy measuring his lawn with a ruler. And he's like, I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, well, I'm trying to see if I'm in violation. And then he like says, by the way, do you know how long it is before it's in violation?
Right.
And I was like, no, I don't actually know that.
And I think that's what's really wonderful about our community. I mean, I worked property management back in my younger days in East Lansing, where they did have an active code enforcement officer that drove around in their small little white Ford Ranger. And they were continually looking for those things that were in violation.
Right.
To me, that's problematic, because all that does is it creates animosity between the resident and the city. And so, like you said, 20-some each year, and that's maybe.
And most of them are repeats.
Right.
I mean, it's very, very seldom that,
You get
somebody breaks bad and puts a pickup truck on their front yard. So
Right.
there's one of them now.
Earl, yes.
Can you go online and look at all of the residential code?
Yes, you can.
Because maybe John mentioned it, I want to rehash something, but in our canvassing during the election time, neighbors kept saying, that house was never lived in. They bought it and just used it to store stuff. There's nobody there. There's still nobody there. Is that a violation, or is that okay because they own the house?
As long as they cut the grass and keep the raccoons
Okay.
out, that's fine.
With the housing shortage, that was an obvious question around the
Sure.
neighborhood. There's a good house.
Sure.
Nobody lives there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, it'd be no different, Earl, than the fact that my dad passed away in January. The house is gonna sit for a little bit, but eventually it's gonna get sold, so families that need a house to move into Williamston School District.
so you can buy a house with never
Right.
having the intent of living there,
Right,
and it's just storage. That's
Right.
okay.
It's an amazing country, isn't it?
Yeah, okay. Well, that's an obvious question neighbors have, so.
and that's probably a really good lead-in if nobody else has any other questions regarding, oh, yep, Steve.
So we had the court report review. Jerry was going to go through that 755-page document. How do we have a system in place where we periodically review those, the
Yep.
staff?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I'm not, burning the midnight oil reading through the code book, but I have a pretty good idea of like what most of our like general code violations are. And most of them, 99% of them are self-evident. You didn't remove the snow from your sidewalk, your lawn looks like a hayfield, you have vehicles in your yard, you have a car wash that is, this is a public meeting, it's all public information, but you have a car wash that is overloading their dumpster and it's now surrounded by debris and they've received a code violation letter. So most of them are things like that. I mean, it's the general code, that's where you would find the code.
And to your answer, this was pre-COVID, we had actually tasked McKenna and Planning Commission to go through and look at those ordinances. Do we have ordinances that don't make sense anymore? And should they come off the book? Should we look at that? Well, that stalled. So we never really did that thorough going through and, is it relevant? Is it enforceable? Do we need to have it on the books? So, at some point, maybe Terry can, flag some that, why do we still have this in here? Have we ever had complaints on it? Do we need to have it? I mean, I think there are, because we wouldn't have had planning commission try to go through the exercise. But again, other things took precedence, and McKenna and planning just never really got through what they intended to do. They would talk about a couple different ordinances at different planning meetings, but no action was really ever taken.
And that's the purpose of my question. I think we should have a system in place, at least incrementally.
Yeah,
Review chapter 7, so that we can determine whether or not
sure,
all those things we just
Right.
mentioned.
right,
are necessary.
absolutely.
So for what
Terry.
it's worth, it's not 755 pages of code that can be violated or whatever. It's the city charter plus all the legal documentation behind it. How much money can we borrow? How many positions are there in the city? What kind of regulations do we have for roads and sewers and all that kind of stuff? It's not just code violations.
Right.
And, by the way, before we had John here, before we had Livingston County doing our building permits,
We had AGS.
we had somebody else, and
AGS.
at least one of my neighbors, this thing about how it creates this tension between the residents and the city. One of my neighbors, these guys came by and they said, oh, you can't do that, you had a porch in the back of your house, you took out the old porch, you're putting in a new porch. You don't have a building permit, we want to see $75 from you. And that created some friction in that guy's mind between him and the city.
Yep.
So the code enforcement that isn't, draconian is a good thing.
Thank you. Terry, or Dan, thanks for showing up. Hope practice was good.
I did. We made it down the highway, got here.
Good.
But I think we do a good job with code enforcement. I mean, if you look at prior to the new owners for the laundromat, there was a serious code violation there. It took a while. It got cleaned up, it got addressed, and that, it actually raised the value of that property, got sold, and now it's much better off. You know, so these things do get addressed. May not be as fast as everyone always wants, but that's the way things go. And when you go a different route with code enforcement where you get more driving around looking for things and more adversarial with it, sometimes you end up in court. We've had several different municipalities around us that were much more proactive in going out and looking for things, and, you know, there were differences of opinions, and a lot of times they ended up in court, and a lot of times they lost. So.
Do you want to share, Chief West, do you want to share your experience when you were in?
Yes, so
Yes.
I was the chief in a small village of Lennon, and the village council, there's a couple council members that wanted strict code enforcement, and our village attorney, and now we're talking about a village that has a budget of about $200,000, and he told them at the beginning, this is going to be expensive, because my job as the chief was easy. I sign the ticket, and then it goes to the village attorney, and he has to file district court findings. He has to file appearances, and just one case was $2,600. So the attorney fees can mount very quickly for going out and finding things. And he tried to tell the village council that. Well, they kind of change gears on that. It can get expensive.
And you know, to kind of wrap this back up, I think, you know, letting the onus be on a resident that may have an issue, or if we blatantly see something like the car wash, and like you said, this is public record, and this has already been addressed, but, you know, if there's something obvious, and our DPW staff, or our city staff, or somebody is driving around, you know, they're probably going to bring it to John's attention, and then that's where that determination gets made. You know, is it as easy as picking up the phone and making a phone call and saying, hey, what's going on? You know, why is the trash piling up, and you know, what's going on? And, you know, hopefully that's an easy way to resolve it, and if not, because I know that for Dan and I, we had a house on Love Street at the corner of Williams and Grand River that had to go through a very long process of complaints, notices issued, getting the city attorney involved before it actually got cleaned up, and it was awful. And for the people that lived around it, it affected their daily lives. They didn't want to look outside and see what was going on. It's a property value issue because it, you know, that will draw down the property value of somebody's home if that is there. So, you know, I think these things get worked out, but, you know, I don't see a need for us to become an enforcing municipality. I think that, you know, letting a resident call and lodge a complaint, and then letting our city figure out why and how to fix it is our best approach, and it's worked for a very long time. I don't see any need to, you know, change that.
You know, plus with the complaints are in, you can review the policy at that time.
Right,
For
exactly.
example, the guy around the corner from us was having sales, like a lot of sales. Before I was on the council, he mentioned to me that, you know, the city had, you know, was interacting with it.
Yes.
And so say that situation is going on, so now the people who are in charge of the government at that point in time, they can say, okay, let's look at how many sales make sense to us.
Right.
And then
Right.
implement it.
Yep, yep. Everything's always a case-by-case basis. It's not cookie cutter. There are sometimes extenuating circumstances.
That's actually a good example,
Yes.
since we're on code enforcement, because there's nothing that prohibits someone from having a yard sale as many times as they want.
Yep.
But what people can't do is tape their signs on our light poles. And what they can't do is put their stuff in the tree lawn in the easement. And those were all, yeah, and those were all addressed in that specific case you're talking about. One of the other ones, that, you know, kind of, I guess, bring it back is there was some discussion going around about whether Cheap Cheap the monkey could go to McCormick Park. And, under a lot of investigation with the chief and I, we discovered that Cheap Cheap could in fact go to the park, he could just not spend the night, so based on our code, so.
A monkey?
Yeah, somebody had a pet monkey and they wanted to be able to walk them in the park, just like somebody walks a dog or any other pet.
Right.
And we don't have any restrictions
Correct.
against that, but it was a very big social media blow up.
Yeah.
And,
But that's an example, but that's an example of, those kind of nuanced things come up, every so often, and so we're on top of it. One thing that, housing, we'll talk about housing a little bit later, but I do think that we need to not seriously consider having rental inspections, because I can tell you that rental of the code enforcement, not all are rentals, but the vast majority are at rental houses. The other thing too is we talked about this in our master plan discussions, that, and this is just across the country, probably across the world, is private equity is buying up housing stock and holding it and renting it, and so you're in a kind of a vicious cycle of there's never like smaller, like quote unquote starter homes or inexpensive housing or fixer uppers, because private equity buys those and it's a good deal for them, and they're able to charge high rental prices. Doesn't mean that everybody who's a landlord is that, but we typically have more issues with single-family rentals and duplexes than we do anywhere else. I mean, by and large, the apartments are good. So this is something, again, we're not solving this tonight. This is something that I'm going to be bringing to council. There's a couple of different planning firms that it's almost like a full comprehensive package. They bring in an ordinance, they bring in a system, and then they can even do the rental inspections for you. I was talking to the Durand city manager a couple months ago. I don't propose that I do this, but Durand's a little bit smaller, but they have a lot more rentals, and they're in much different financial shape than we are, and so he's their rental inspector as part of his job. So, but again, it's part of the property values are depressed there because the town pains me because I grew up there, but folks are starting to buy up all the housing and then charge exorbitant rent, so it's pricing people out of owning their own home, even a place that is significantly more affordable than in Williamston. So I'll bring that to you as a package, and again, we'll debate it, discuss the merits. One of the companies I was talking to, I was surprised by this number because we're at about 60%, 60-some% of owner-occupied housing. The city of Howell is 50%, which was really surprising. But again, there's a lot of houses there. The housing stock is good, and they can command high rents there, and it's almost impossible for folks to get into the housing entry market there.
Can a city be a landlord?
We can, but I don't recommend that. Not at our size and scope.
Jane, like Williamstown Township at one point in time had one rental property, but they have to pay taxes on that. They have to pay taxes on it. It gets into a whole nother deal.
I mean, the thought that crossed my mind that if we could reinvent the system by becoming a landlord, because of how bad it is.
I know you changed the slide, but, so, I'm in favor, I'll be honest. At first, when I first thought about the rental inspection stuff, that's kind of, but with the house that we had on Love Street, I mean, we were ready to move over that house. So like, and I know we're gonna get more into this, but in places where they have them, what does that look like? Is that a yearly thing? Is that every 2 years? What does it look like?
So there's an initial, and then it's typically for single family, it's every 3 years. And the inspection part is actually, the cost is really low, and I have the number written down, like what percent it is of the rent. But for a lot of these places, the cost of compliance is steep, because a lot of, unregulated, and that's the other thing too, is if if you have a rental house and, you know, you're always able, you're not putting any money into it at all, you know, you're not, you know, heaven forbid, there's, you know, black mold or issues like that. And for us as a community, I'm not against rentals, I've rented before, had a rental house that I owned before. If the quality of the unit keeps going low, the rent goes low, and then, you know, the quality of the tenant can be somewhat difficult, so. Go ahead.
Well, what about like updated electrical? You've got older homes, you've got the electrical issues, the plumbing. I mean, is there gonna be a whole deal where you gotta redo your plumbing, or you gotta, you know, update your electrical? That's gonna be very costly for a lot of,
Yeah, and again, there's a lot of discussions that have to take place at the council table,
Yeah.
for you all to decide that's what you wanna do. And I think that, you know, tonight it's a good start to talk about it. And I can see the need for it, but again, I wanna see how it works. I mean, when I was working in the city of Royal Oak, which is, you know, 60,000 people, we had the same kind of program, but I mean, it's a community of 60,000 people. Dexter and Chelsea, we didn't have a rental inspection program. We didn't have the need for it, so.
But did I just hear you correctly when you said that we are pretty much 60% owner-occupied housing, which means we have 40% out there in our small little community
more like
that are rentals?
I think when you include apartments and
Okay.
multifamily
Sure.
units, we're like, I think it's like 65-35 is the number.
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely advocate for it, and the only reason I say that is because we do have a lot of rentals. When I was a reserve police officer, there is a house that is on South Putnam that is a lower level, upper level rental. And at that particular time, the upper level was being used as a grow. And you went down Putnam, windows rolled up, you could smell, and I'm just thinking to myself, the poor family that lives in the bottom of that rental. That's their daily, you know, existence, having that. And so, you know, I think it's definitely a good idea, and we'll be able to dictate the inspection, correct?
Right, yep.
Because if it becomes unoccupied, that's the perfect opportunity to do an inspection before it's occupied again. So
Yep.
it may, those inspection schedules may float depending on when it becomes occupied, when it turns over, and then once it's occupied again, a scheduled calendar. Okay.
So we're full staffed. We can skip that one. No, just kidding. So I do want to point this out. We are now with our cadet in the police department. We're fully staffed. We had a retirement in wastewater at the wastewater plants, and so we have a vacant position. So we're re-advertising for that. But the net head count will be the same. Chief, I don't know if you want to add anything. You regularly talk about this at your council reports, but if you want to talk about it.
I do, yes. With our recruit in the academy, he graduates May 9th, will be full staff. We did require, or ask that he sign a contract, so I anticipate full staffing for a few years.
So what was the contract for?
For 4 years of employment, that he stay at the city for 4 years, unless there's a mutual agreement. If he has another opportunity somewhere to leave, but quite frankly, I wouldn't do that unless I had someone to take his place. So, we're
So,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, that's okay. That's fabulous. Is that going to be for all new hires moving forward, that you'll do a contract for length of employment? Because I don't know if we've ever had that in the past.
Yeah, not for new hires. This is because we're sponsoring him in the police academy.
I see. Gotcha.
So,
Perfect.
that's a reason. So, no, for just a hire, someone that's previously already licensed, no,
Gotcha.
we won't have him sign a contract.
Since this is a visioning session, I'm going to ask this because you were at one time a council member. And so what would be your vision for growth? And I know we've talked about it at our visioning sessions, goal setting sessions in Lincoln Council. Would you ever want to try to bid for the opportunity for Meridian Township coverage?
With the staffing, allowable staffing, yes. You know, and I just attended the Michigan Association of Chiefs of Police Conference 2 weeks ago, and the consensus amongst the chiefs is that the tide is turning, in a positive way towards staffing. We're not quite there yet, but we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. So if there comes a time when it's not an issue to have more staffing, I would certainly entertain it.
Because I know that they do have a new, township supervisor because of the, just the most recent election. Have you met, Roth yet?
On a virtual meeting.
Okay, all right. So, and I think that the Meridian Township contract's probably coming up in another year to 18
Williamstown,
months.
yeah.
Williamstown Township. And would you ever want to expand towards Weberville if they had a need?
That, again, I think that's a possibility as long as staffing's there. The staffing in the right contract, with contract language for both those entities.
Okay.
But again, I think the key is staffing. Our first responsibility is for the city.
Right,
And,
absolutely.
but if the tide turns
Sure.
and staffing's not an issue, yeah, I would certainly want to do that
Okay.
and expand.
Perfect. I just wanted to hear what your idea for growth was, and I appreciate that.
So let's talk a little bit about economic development and some of the things that we have in place. The marketing and community branding, that's primarily done through the DDA, and I think we do a really, really, really good job of that, and I think we improve and get better at that. Every month, we've added events, we've expanded, advertising across all forms of media, traditional, legacy media, TV, radio, and certainly have an online presence, so I think we do a good job of that. That we're still like in the middle of, putting together a more comprehensive marketing plan, and that's something DDA will be focusing on in the next fiscal year. Placemaking, I mean, we do, no better example of a placemaking event and then impact than Chainsaw Art in the Park. I mean, we had a wonderful weekend event. I think the analytics is we had 3,000 people or so, give or take, over the weekend that came from all over the place. And then we got the sculptures that hopefully will last us 10 to 15 years. So it was a great placemaking event. Placemaking can be event-based, or it can also be things like the kayak launch. That's something that we did a couple years ago. The second kayak launch, that's either been landing. So we continue to do a really good job with that. With the master plan and our zoning ordinance updates, how does that fit into economic development? Well, first and foremost with the master plan, and we're probably halfway to 2/3 done with that, is identifying what we'd like to see in our standards, so that regardless of what comes, we have it appropriately, landscaped and designed. I think that's a process we're smack in the middle of, and thank you to all of you for, I think most of the people in this room participated in our joint session for that. Planning Commission will be at the April meeting. There's no meeting next week, but at the April meeting should be looking at our first look for goals and objectives. Although that's where housing kind of comes into play. It's likely that we'll have a site plan for housing at the April meeting, and that's at the Gary Tice on the property. It's right down Raleigh Road. It's between the Red Cedar Co-op and Fox Run. So it's 13 units, proposed 13 units, quadplexes, so 52 new units. I've seen the renderings. They're very nice. I think they're great. It is rental housing, but some of the units are going to be 1,700 square feet, so it'll be a nice way for folks to enter into the Williamston market. And it's Craig Moulton, the same development group who did the 304 apartment building. So they do a lot of projects, do a lot of high quality work. So have a chance there to add about 52 units, 52. And then something council did rezone the property on Lynn Road about 6 months ago now, I think. And they're still putting together their project, and that's potential to add another 150 to 200 total units. So we could be looking at the potential for about 250 or so housing units that are very realistically going to be built in the next year to 18 months. So Yes,
And you're going to the meeting with the school board to
correct.
discuss?
Yep, I'll be here on, certainly council members are welcome to come too, but that's the March 11th, I believe. I think, it's the second Tuesday. There is a ZBA meeting that night, but I'll be here instead. So, the other thing as far as economic development, we talked in the joint session about the I-1 zoning. We haven't really fully discussed what the expanded uses would or could be, but, this is my, personal and professional opinion that our I-1 category is pretty narrow. It's very difficult to have something to fit in there. It's not impossible. We do have some uses like Medline, which is an I-1, but some of the language there, we could probably expand some of the uses, but still meeting the spirit and the intent of the I-1 district. It's meant to be more of a high-tech, kind of a lower environmental impact. I don't mean like a pollution standpoint, but from noise and things like that, truck traffic. So, and frankly, as Amerisource Bergen, which is in the I-2 zoning district, that would fit perfectly in I-1 because it's a big facility. They do a lot of work there. They employ a number of people, and you never hear a peep. And they're our neighbor of the DPW building, and they're actually investing quite a bit. They did a lot of site work. They replaced their whole fence, and they're doing some interior stuff too. So it's good to see them continue to expand. So, any questions before we move on to the next 3 or 4 on the list there? Okay. The Tifa Ice House project, we have a whole Tifa slide, so I won't spend too much time on that, but that's, the Tifa board, I think, is pretty resolute, and we have a couple of members here tonight. Mr. Smuziak said he was just a resident, you undersold yourself.
I did, I undersold him, sorry. So much more.
And then Mr. Jenkins are on the Tifa board, and I'm optimistic that the project, or a project, will get done there. And again, I think partly it's Tifa's resolve to see that done. So the inflow and infiltration study comes up again. That's literally, there's a device, it's a manhole cover that can measure flow, stormwater in and out of the manholes, which will give us an idea of where the inflow and infiltration is really impacting our system. I have some suspicions on where a lot of it's coming from, not because I'm a hydraulic engineer. I just know that the golf course floods, we have manholes, water probably gets in there. I mean, you don't need to be a rocket surgeon to figure that one out, but there are other areas in town that we will be investigating all over town with these kind of a modified manhole that has basically a flow meter on it. The village of Manchester, they still a village or are they city now?
They're sitting
now, which is, it's about 10 miles south of Chelsea. They did this recently because they were confronted, they have, is it the Raisin River?
Yes.
They have the Raisin River that goes through Manchester. It's actually very similar to Williamston in a lot of respects. They were faced with whether to build a 1 million gallon equalization basin for $4 million or figure out where the I&I was coming from. And so they did the I&I study, and they were able to find it, and they were able to fix the areas where the stormwater was getting into their system, and so they don't have to build an EQ basin now. So
But it was very successful.
Yeah.
And they're continuing to find other spots too, but they found the biggest part of it, so.
And they found it in kind of like in a park. It was like in a really strange spot that you wouldn't expect. So anyway, I think that's important. Why is that important for economic development? I mean, if we have treatment capacity, we have, our water system is new. We can pull a lot of water from the ground. We can pull way more water from the ground than we can treat at the wastewater plant on the opposite end. So, but the I&I will help us, when we do add housing or add industry, that having the capacity at the plant in its current form without having to add an EQ basin or adding another treatment train is, that the plant is fairly well landlocked over there. So I think that's really important, and that will be coming to all of you. So, and as far as like future development, redevelopment, and the commercial industrial land available, just kind of click forward here. I do want to point out we still have, that's where the DG Fresh is now, but we still have all of this property that's currently available. The majority of this is I-1. This is actually C and a little bit of office. This is zoned office, I believe. So still a lot of property out as you head towards Lynn Road, that's wide open. We also have these areas out by the highway. This is where potentially tailgaters would go, this little corner here. This is currently C4 zoning, and this is I2, heavy industrial. This yellow, this is right next to Nottingham Forest. This is currently zoned residential, and this is all zoned, well, other than the frontage, this is all zoned rural residential. This is the Lynn Road property I spoke of earlier that was rezoned. And then this is where, here's Mirador, where the senior center is now, so you have all that property that's in there. So, and this is all commercial, zone commercial. So there's still a lot of available land here, lots of opportunities for folks to do things, and you know, we talked about this at length at the Planning Commission and in our joint work sessions that, you know, there's north of Lynn Road and there's south of Lynn Road, and that we really want to be mindful of this corridor in its entirety, but there's some very specific things that we'd like to see, especially when you get north of Lynn Road, and some things that we don't want to see, frankly. And so that will come up in the updated master plan and the zoning ordinance. We did have a ZBA case just the week or so ago, where, you know, the request was for basically a removal of all the landscape standards, and the ZBA, they granted a little bit of relief, but not some, and it was expressed to the developer that our design standards are important. You know, even though you're right off the highway, if we start like, you know, skimping on the landscape or not requiring a sidewalk, and yeah, it's a sidewalk to nowhere now, but it'll be a sidewalk to somewhere eventually, and we don't want this corridor to develop like, you know, South Cedar or Old Miss Road, that we want it to have its own unique and distinct feel. And I've shared examples, you know, the City of Chelsea, Dexter, where they had overlay districts where you could see what was built before the overlay district and after. And so with this, for the most part, and the overlay standards are in there, but we have the opportunity with this whole corridor to, you know, still be permissive and allow development, but to make sure that ultimately we're getting what we want. And again, part of the NOLI discussion, we talked about, you know, changing some of the square foot allowances for buildings to, you know, focus more on, you know, smaller regional or local type
Can
things.
you go back to the industrial park area?
Yep.
So that's been empty so long. So do we need to, some kind of reinvention as to how we're approaching that, or is it business as usual and just hope that it eventually turns into something?
So that's a great philosophical discussion and policy discussion for the seven of you to decide how aggressive we want to be in making something happen there. I mean, you can change the zoning and something can get built quickly, but sometimes it's okay to be choosy. Sometimes it's okay, without being completely exclusive. I mean, what's sort of, and this is a reality, right here, very dense residential neighborhood. Right here, very dense residential neighborhood. And you're across the street from, you know, what is industrial property. This is frankly probably why it's known as I-1. This is that USDA station. This is a very low impact. This is Medline's big building, but it's very low impact too. So
Granger owns that, right?
that's correct.
And it's zoned in a way that would lead them to, so if we rezone it, say, for a job, residential, then they wouldn't be able to do what they need to do, right? So then wouldn't they want to sell it?
Well, I mean, I think there's a couple things. I mean, Granger, as a landowner, is just interested at some point in selling the property and making a profit on the sale. They're less concerned. They're not gonna. They don't have that property to hold it and then build their own facility. So, I mean, changing the zoning, that's one way that would possibly jumpstart the development there, but way back in 2023, we had a joint session with planning, and we talked about residential zoning and all the available land that is appropriately zoned for residential. And we're starting to see that now. I mean, we have, roughly 200 and some units in the queue. There's another development, kind of the extension of the Churchill Downs neighborhood that they're interested. They haven't brought anything in. We just had some very preliminary discussions about that. So we have a lot of this land that's zoned, and Councilmember Hanson has brought this up before. It would be good to have some additional employment base in the city. So, okay. So the TIFA is in excellent financial shape. It's basically the area, on Progress Court in the first half of Industrial Park Drive, and then it also includes Deep Lake and that neighborhood there. So TIFA is generating good income, and so we have a series of projects that we want to see put in place. Again, this is not the first time that the council has seen this, but I do want to kind of go down to the highlighted portion. We're going to talk about streets here in a second. And there's some, I wouldn't say it's disagreement. I mean, I think maybe some of the circumstances have changed about the TIFA being able to pay for a portion of Railroad Street. I think folks are remembering things maybe before there was TIFA 2B, there was TIFA A and TIFA B. So we're hopeful that TIFA can fund some of that project in the future. And a lot of these are internal to some of our facilities, but removing the old railroad barn, getting rid of that building's about ready to fall on itself. We do store some stuff in there. It will also help clean up that whole elevator street, or Norma Jean Court, as it's more affectionately called. Thank you for reminding me of that the other day, Mr. Newton.
Yeah.
So if that's going to develop, I mean, we should clean up our stuff while we can. There is an opportunity. There's a couple of acres as you head east on Norma Jean towards the end that were set aside, and it's one of those. It's kind of like the turbine that was on the agenda since 2010. Like the replat has been on the TIFA agenda since, I don't know, probably 10 years. So there's property there that could be developed or sold or whatever, or put to better use than us just pushing snow there. So that's where TIFA, cleaning up our stuff and then helping set the stage in and around that area. And that doesn't even, nothing's included on this list of TIFA participating in the Ice House project, because we are in the middle of a development agreement negotiation, but that's a possibility, whether it's with a current developer or if that doesn't go so well with somebody else. Yeah.
Probably a dumb question, but what is the old railroad barn? Is that the one on the elevator on the north side of the end?
Yep, the red one.
Long, low, sort of, we want to tear it down because it's ugly or old or broken or what?
All of the above.
All of it, all of it.
Needs a new roof, the walls are caving in.
Yeah, a lot of stuff for National Night Out was stored over there. What else is stored over
National
there?
Night Out, back, all the way back to Art Fest on
Art
the
Fest,
river.
yep.
Jubilee used to store some stuff in there, but we got our stuff out, I don't know how long ago. It's needed, I think, I don't know, Ray could probably tell you, but
Right.
like the Class A barricades, I think.
Right.
Got stored in there, broken down.
There is a couple of useful bins in there for storing barricades and whatnot, and cones, but most of it, the water's coming right through the roof. There's some old pipe in there that I wouldn't even want to use for water main or anything. The raccoons and the they've been in there, and
Sure.
it's
Is there an,
moldy and.
so, based on what I'm just hearing then, most, everything that's in there would have to be discarded?
Well, there is a trailer in there that's in good shape, and it's back when we did our own sidewalks and concrete work. And then there is some pipe that's probably of good use, some SDR 26 and whatnot. Not a huge amount. Most of them are short pieces of stuff we've collected over time, but we could salvage some of it. That concrete trailer with all those cement fittings and stuff can go to auction.
Right.
They can use that pipe in there. It's not class 54 ductile. I remember seeing a lot of it as class 52, which is not our spec. It's below our
Is
spec.
54 a little bit above 53? but not quite as.
Well, kind of, yes. If you want to think about
You
that.
kind of got to move on. I mean-
But yeah, but.
Right,
but
but I guess what I'm saying is, do we have the ability, whatever we're going to retain, do we have storage space for that if this building comes down?
Not yet. I was under the impression that we would build the new building and then move the contents, but there's not gonna be a lot.
There's not gonna be a lot, okay, all right.
Most of it's gonna be
Yeah.
dumpster.
And so, again, not to like beat this to death, because
Okay.
we've seen it before, but, and thanks for the insight. The idea, so, the original plan, I mean, was, when the city acquired that property, was to build basically a twin building to where the existing large DPW barn is, and that's like a $2.5 or $3 million project now, because it's, 12,000 square feet, and it's high bays, and that is, frankly, unless we become the regional road commission hub, we don't need that. What we need is another small, and it's listed up there, storage garage DPW, and it's exactly how it sounds. It's not heated, it's not climate controlled, but it's a garage that we can store stuff. And that would be, the red barn is actually larger than, and we're talking about like a 40 by 80 garage, something like that, 4 bays. So more of like a, commercial grade, but more like, not even of the scale of the one that faces west, because there's the main building, and then there's the facility that was built that's big. It's 5,000 square feet. It's got, I think, what are the doors on that one? 35, 40 feet?
Yeah, they're not as.
But we have tall equipment that stores there, but this would not be for that. This would be more of a smaller scale. Then get that built, and then we can move that stuff in there.
Yeah, that building's insulated and heated and whatnot. All of our emergency equipment is in there, the back truck, the plow trucks, and so they're heated, but this wouldn't require that at all.
So we touched on this on Monday, the plan, assuming council is agreeable, and we do have a good estimates for the first 2 projects. We'd be looking at doing High Street from North Putnam to Cedar. Why just that section? That's considered a major road, major street, so there's more funding available to do that. There is regardless, if council decides not to do this, I hope you don't, but if you decide not to, then we do have to deal with the storm pipe issue under the street anyway. And that section of road is really more of a quilt of potholes. And again, it's I get it, it's easy to say, well, let's not do that section, let's do the whole street. And frankly, I think, not for any of you, I think there's been some of that, it's been the dynamic with street projects, that we wait until, like in North Putnam, for example, which was a great project, and it came in, on time, and it was a little bit under budget, and that was a good, meaningful project, but we can't like skip fixing sections that really need to be fixed, waiting for the $3 or $4 million full street fix. Or we'll never, as Mr. Hanson likes to point out, we'll be bankrupt because we'll never be able to afford. 2025 construction prices are going to be cheaper than 2026 and 2028 and 2030 and 2050 and et cetera, et cetera.
Isn't the entirety of High Street on our water and sewer project map though that you have?
No, just the portion. Just the front portion. Sorry, if you look at it,
Because it's circled all the way to Mullet.
that is a Cedar Street.
No, I'm talking High Street. Because you want to do Putnam on High Street to Cedar.
So here's how.
But, right.
This is Cedar to Mullet. We want to do this first portion.
Okay, so you want to do that first portion,
Right.
but eventually we're going to get to the rest of High Street.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I
Yep.
see.
Yep.
All right,
Yep.
perfect. Thank you
Does
for that
Mills
clarification.
still include it?
So let's talk about, first we'll talk about Mullet. So the plan for Mullet is to do a double chip seal on there. And it's a short stretch. And has anybody been to Mullet Street?
I drove by it today.
Yeah.
It's a mess.
Well, it's that time of year where the frost is starting to come out of the ground, and to grade it, you'd have to literally grade it like every morning, and you just don't have the resources to do that. We currently grade Mullet, Railroad, and Mill with a belly blade plow because we don't have a road grader. And so we make do with what we have, but by doing that treatment on mullet, we'll get a chance to see what double chip seal looks like. You know, it's definitely, I'm 100% sure it'll be 100% better than what it is. It's not exactly the same as paving it and having curb and gutter there, but it's one of those solutions I think we need to put in place, because we can't wait forever. And for us to do a full reconstruct with curb and gutter there, I mean, again, you're looking at a street that isn't very well traveled with, I think, 3 residences on it. And we'd end up spending, you know, $250,000 on just that small section. Yes?
Not to pile on, but if we're gonna have everything prices raising, we're gonna have to deal with Mechanic Street, going down by where the juke, all that, around the football field, that's getting really bad. And West South Street is getting really bad too.
So-
I don't know if you've looked at that at all, but if it's gonna keep going up and up and up, that might be something, you know.
I can only speak back to February 2022 when I started. Like, I don't know what happened before that. I mean, but my view is we didn't fix the most critical things to fix. We just waited because we were waiting for the perfect solution. And we have beautiful spreadsheets that are like this long and this deep. We could pave half the streets, I think, with the spreadsheets that we have in the file there. And it is color coded, it's beautiful. And it's a lot of good analytics, but we need to, again, I guess I'm just overly practical, we need to start working on the list. And what we do annually, we rate streets, it's called a PACER rating. I forget what the acronym stands for, but Ray probably knows, but he doesn't want to share it. So, like a new street like Lloyd or Williams, those are a PACER 1. High Street, that section, Williams and Lloyd would be a 10. High Street would be a 1. Church Street would be a 1 to 3 to 5 to like probably a 5. So every section gets a rating. So we do that annually. We're actually required to do that. But we can't wait to make all of High Street a 10 and let everything else, and they're fall apart. And I ride these streets as much as anybody here. And, our job is to continue to figure out ways to, with the limited resources we have about 350,000, give or take, for major streets, which is Church, High, Lynn, roads like that, to deal with annually. I mean, it's not enough, right? Local streets, it's about a third of that, and that's basically everything else.
So here's my question. The road revenue was an issue back when I was on council before. And the thing that was in my mind was that if we need additional revenue, and we're not going after it, is it up to the public to decide if they want to pay more and have better roads, or pay less and let them go?
Yeah, I mean, that's again, for the 7 of you, you would get to make that determination if you wanted to do a millage specific to streets, but I don't think you should do that. I think you should give us the opportunity to have a plan in place and start doing some of these projects. Because the other thing that we'll do, much like the patch that needs to be done on High Street, further to the east, or in and around school and South Street, there's areas that we'll do that you can't do the whole street, you can't do the whole length, but we can do the worst spots. And then as we move through time, you keep the good streets good, like South Putnam, for example. We did crack fill in the first summer that I was here in 2022. It's time to do that again. And crack fill is exactly like it sounds. There's cracks in the road, and you put the asphalt polymer mix in there, and that extends the life of the road. So we'll continue to do that. Even doing construction projects, we'll always continue to do various levels of maintenance on all of our.
Yeah, as long as you're comfortable, I'm fine. I just want to throw that out. It came up.
I gave up being comfortable when I decided to do this stupid job. But it's a never-ending. It just streets are you're always rolling the rock up the road. You are. That's the way it works.
And I think what we can see is that in the last 5 years, we've gotten better at this.
Yeah.
Things have changed with staffing, things have changed with our mindset, and instead of having spreadsheets shown to us, we're actually getting work done. we were very fortunate that Slotkin came through, and previous to John, our other city manager was familiar with how to write grants and did absolutely everything right to get that money, to put us in that position to be chosen with those funds. And I think that, and Dan can attest to this because he's like been on council longest, is that we're doing things better, we're doing things correctly. We're not doing it at 10%, we're doing it at 100%. So these projects will get done, and we will focus more on it and look for more pots of money and figure out how to do it without burdening our residents. But it wasn't until about 5 years ago that we really put the effort, and as council, put more pressure on a city manager and city staff to say, we've got to do something. You can't keep coming in here and saying, well, somebody just gives me $20 million, I can make the problem go away.
Right.
Nobody's gonna do that. But with $3 million, absolutely, we picked the most needed, I call them pocket neighborhood projects that we could do, and look at what we've been able to improve. Same thing when we were able to do Middle Street. That was MDOT and state of Michigan funding, but we were able to completely do Middle Street, do those mains that come off of Middle Street onto Fulton and Cedar and White Street and everything. And so when you start improving those smaller spaces, and then you look at the big picture, we're not in such a bad position anymore. And Dan, I think you wanted to add something.
Yeah, the pot of money we got from the Fed was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But what I loved, when I got on council, it was, what type of millage are we gonna go with? Are we gonna do an income tax? Because we can't afford to do any of this, and we can't do any, and since John stated, not to disparage anybody else who was here before, they've worked with the tools that they have. John, this is the money we've got, this is the solution we've got. I love hearing about the double chip ceiling and being able to do some of these areas, because if you've driven down Corwin Road, that's basically what that is. You drive down, is it a perfectly 100% new asphalt road? No, it's a heck of a lot better than the dirt road it was before.
Right.
And so for $50,000, if we can do a similar thing on, I can't remember if 50 was the mullet or if that was when, you showed us some numbers on it. But we're getting some solutions that aren't, hey, are we gonna go for an income tax or are we going for the bond? And I think we need to continue to let John and staff cook a little bit, and I like,
I do too.
I like the solutions you bring.
Well, and the thing too is that, we don't hide any of what we're doing. We're so transparent about it. And if we continue to educate our community and help them understand why we're doing what we're doing, I think that, we get buy-in. And just like Dan said, Mullet Street's been dirt for my entire lifetime. So has Mill and Railroad. To not have dirt streets in the city anymore, wouldn't that be wonderful? I think that'd be great, even if it's that small solution now that can eventually be a bigger solution later. So I think we're on the right path, and we just have to keep working it out.
Well, and those projects are like High Street and Mullet, and it is Railroad and Mill, both of those. Those are within our reach with our existing resource base that we have. Progress Court and Industrial, same thing. Those are TIFA funded entirely, so we can do that. But all the while, we still have money from the federal allocation where, we start looking at Alicia and Fulton and White in that area as projects, in the very near future. And we'll keep, there's different pots of money that come open. They're transportation, they're called TED funds. We're not an entitlement community, which makes us, and it's, the idea of those projects is they're for communities that are more financially distressed, and that's based on your average income and census tracts and things like that. So we're disadvantaged in that regard, but we'll continue to, when we can, get street funds. It's for just to get street funds, other than our small urban money, which is, it's a guarantee, it's just every 4 years. So, with sidewalks, I mean, we've started in the last couple of years of really, I mean, it starts with all of you, and you've dedicated the funding to do it, and now we have the, you know, the staffing and the energy to see those things through, and I know we still have some sidewalks yet to do in the current fiscal year. So we'll continue to do that. We're kind of taking the middle out approach. And we do have some parts of our network that are, you know, they've probably never been touched in 50 years or so. So we'll continue to do that. Non-motorized paths, I just always keep this on here. We do have the Red Cedar Trail. And I got a couple of slides in the packet. I'm not going to go over those tonight. I think everybody knows that project. Basically from Red Cedar Bend Landing all the way to Old Mill Park. There's some easement issues on some of the properties, and through DDA we're trying to work through those in the coming year. And then we did secure a grant for the Memorial Park Honor for All Trail. It's $800,000, and it's just contingent upon the county millage continuing or passing. And so there's a possibility we could get those funds earlier, but I kind of view that as a 2020 project.
That was my favorite slide.
It's a treat, but on there 3 times. So with our new opportunities moving forward, I mean, we talked about managed growth in the master plan, the zoning ordinance, our possible changes, our EDA marketing plan, different projects. City tree nursery, Barb Burke at our office placed their first order for trees today, so that's kind of cool. A lot of Jack Smith and Earl and a lot of folks helped make that happen. We did receive a donation for that project as well. And as soon as I get permission from the person who did that, I'll share that with who did that. So that's kind of a cool thing. You know, we have the land. We want to make sure we're investing in our tree canopy because in towns like ours, it really enhances the quality of life and the value. As difficult as it can be to sometimes maintain the canopy, it really adds to the value of our streets. So Dahlstrom Park, let's talk about that for a second. And this is frankly one of the reasons why we do this strategic planning session. Because we try as much as we can to think through all of the things that are a priority for the community, or the things that we absolutely have to do, like have clean water and paved streets. But from time to time, a community group will show up and they'll have a really good idea, and they're really passionate about it, and we've never talked about it. And more than that, we haven't budgeted for it, or even talked about it, budgeting for it. So I did want to put this on here tonight. We did come through the Parks Commission. They made a recommendation to all of you to have a study done for Dahlstrom Park, which I agree with. And we're still going to do that yet in the current fiscal year that we're in. But I just want, I guess, a bit of word of caution. And it's great to have people who have energy and have ideas to do things, but we have to make sure that we discuss it first, and that we reach some sort of consensus. And I know it can be a challenge when a group shows up and they have a really good idea. And I'm skewing the numbers a little bit, but when it's a $500,000 project and we have a $2 million general fund budget and somebody's contribution is 5% of that, it's not an attainable thing for us to do. It doesn't mean we don't care. It doesn't mean that we won't pursue a grant to make it happen. But and the other thing, also, I mean, we all know Dahlstrom Park. I mean, we nobody likes this, but we have a project there fixed with a cone right now. I mean, the old storm grate, which just didn't survive the winter. The asphalt there is bad. It's crowned. The fence is bad. So there's a lot of things at Dahlstrom Park that need attention beyond us even thinking about adding amenities to that. So, but we are through parks, and we will go through somewhat of a master plan for that park, and it won't be horribly expensive, but it has to be through the lens of what is there now, how does it serve the community, and making sure that we don't quote unquote overdo it, and specifically to I guess the request that came from the community group. The idea is that we need more pickleball courts. I mean, I'm not going to argue whether we do or we don't, but I know that the senior center has been talking about adding a couple of pickleball courts on their own. I know when Councilmember Hanson was still the liaison for parks, him and I took a walk to McCormick, and we were trying to eyeball, is there a way to add pickleball courts there? So well, pickleball courts, I think having more pickleball courts is good. It can't be at the expense of the other things that happen at Dahlstrom Park. I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but in that specific park, I mean, you've got half of it is the school field, you have the sled hill, and you have the people that park there on a daily basis, and the other thing is mostly underwater. So, not my way of poo-pooing it, but when we have these sessions, we have to be realistic, and not that we don't appreciate outside ideas. The city tree nursery, I didn't come up with that, that was a resident, but again, the scale and the scope of that, the financial impact of that is, a fraction of what, someone who had an idea. Again, I could load the room full of curling nuts and, put the hard lien for us to get a curling facility. And it would sound very reasonable, and I can tell you, we don't have any money, because curling's an expensive hobby. But anyway, just wanted to kind of like update all of you on where that is and bring that back in. And also at Dahlstrom, there's it's a public parking lot, but you have the business folks that park there. There's an impact to them, whatever happens there. There's Jubilee, there's a lot of the impacts that we need to consider. The good news for that is in the DDA district, and that segues right into DDA infrastructure. The DDA is in a very, very good financial shape, like everything else in our city other than streets and utilities. And so we're going to be focusing on fixing the parking lots that are in the district and paving them, not all of them, but, and I'll share this next. I want to share with DDA first in a couple weeks, and the council will see that as part of the actual budget process of what we have planned as far as, we'll reach a consensus at DDA and bring that to all of you. But we do have resources to fix up parking lots and things like that. And also the streetscape, one of the major things at DDA, which may seem like a small thing, but we had the old 18 metal planter boxes downtown that we removed because they're just past their useful life. You couldn't repaint them or fix them. But what do we replace that with? And we've been working in conjunction with the Garden Club on different design ideas, and also the fence that's basically in front of Ellie's that runs almost that whole length of that block. What do we do there? How do we make that, improve that, and really enhance the look of that part of downtown? So a lot of good things coming from DDA. And there's a couple things. DDA's been good with their finances. We did have some bonds and debt service fall off, and the valuation of the district's improved. So that's all a good thing. You add it all up, and there's resources to do projects specific to DDA. So, anyone? Everybody asleep? It's good. Everyone's favorite piece of equipment. So we
This
had
is a
this.
very cool slide.
Well, we
Dr.
had
Did you
this.
pay
We had
attention?
this last year, and there were a couple of reasons why we didn't move forward with it. But these are deployed all over the place and wherever there's leaves. And currently, we do a good job with the system that we have, the equipment that we have available. But it's 4 people and 3 pieces of equipment. This is really a truck plus a tow behind and 2 people, and it also keeps the leaves out of the street. So we will be bringing this to you as part of the budget process and what it's going to cost and how we go about paying for that. Could possibly pay for all of it with equipment, like our equipment fund, or doing some transfers from the general fund. But this believe it or not, will have a big community impact.
Yes.
It really will. You may not think about it, but think about mid to late October when the leaves are starting to come down. It's starting to rain a lot, and you get that it looks like smeared pumpkin everywhere. That's really difficult to clean. People track it into their driveway, into their house. Having the leaves would be just right to the extension, and then they just get sucked up in the vacuum.
Wouldn't you say too, Ray, that this would put less strain on our streets if we switch to this mechanism instead of the front end loader with the scooper
Oh,
and all
absolutely.
that? Okay.
You're right, it's that clam bucket, has to pinch
Scrapes
those
along.
leaves and it scrapes the asphalt. I mean, I don't think it ruts it much, but it does scrape it up and give it an
Yeah.
undesirable look. And they've already said, well, you know, on our new streets, we gotta be really super careful. Sometimes they'll catch the catch basin.
Right.
They'll jerk the catch basin out, then we have to repair that.
Right.
We called this in the past our Dr. Seuss machine. You have you got a truck driver and, you have an operator sitting in the seat there with this joystick levers operating this arm coming out, and they're literally driving down the curb and sucking the leaves off the extension. So you don't have to have the sweeper truck coming and cleaning up the street after you've smeared them all over.
Yeah.
This would just come by and suck them off the extension, and then, you know, in your what, 3 guys, maybe a guy that jumps on with a rake and helps out a little bit, and then without having that many vehicles, a dump truck, loader, 2 pickups, the amount of diesel fuel alone is crazy over the season.
Can we apply for the job of using the circuit?
We're gonna need to see some references from you.
Might be able to trade them some bagels for, you know.
But there was a lot of things that I think, I want to say 2000, John was there and facilitated this purchase. And there was a lot of things, it was one of the first ones that Spartan did, so we worked with them, and ours was actually the prototype. We got the little, if you could see up there where the guy sits, where the leaf dust comes down, we got the roof, and we also got a ladder installed. They welded on the back of it so we could access the top, clean the screen. So it was kind of fun. We were involved in actually making all those changes to that, and they incorporated it in. So same company.
Yeah, that's very cool.
So big picture wise, is this thing affordable?
I want to say my last quote that I got for, was it 175, John? Does that sound?
Yeah, it's not
close?
cheap.
So
No.
It's
Don't expect
affordable.
it to be cheap, but is it, can we fit it into the existing budget without getting it big?
If we were to go that way, some of the pieces of equipment that we have that are leaf specific, can some of those be sold?
That's what I was
Or
just
are
wondering,
most of
yeah.
them used in other operations?
So I guess I'll answer that. We have, how we do that, I mean, we use the loader,
Right.
and it's really just the clam on the loader. I don't know if they use that clam for anything else. It's just the
Yeah, the big
Right.
one.
Yeah.
Sure.
but other than that, I mean, it goes in the Packer truck.
There's a
Yeah.
small John Deere tractor that keeps raking them up too. They got some type of squeegee screen on the front of
Yeah.
that.
So
Small.
potentially, but I think we use, all the other pieces of equipment we use have a primary function.
Gotcha.
And in particular, the loader, that's one of the biggest
Yeah.
advantages too, is saving hours on the loader.
Yeah.
Right, well, I was just gonna say, you're saving gas because you're reducing the number of vehicles
Right.
that we use to go out and do leaf cleanup. You still have staff on that's doing their daily activities, but you can deploy those staff to do other things. You wouldn't have to have, you know, all
Right,
four
exactly.
staff doing it.
It was
So
huge. We
there
had
will
like
be
11
some-
guys on leave.
Yeah, there will be some cost savings to
Right,
it,
right.
so.
And I thought there was another piece of equipment. They actually load those in the back of a really old Packer garbage truck.
Yeah, the
That's
dump
the one I
truck,
was thinking
yes,
about.
the
Yeah,
dump
that,
truck.
yeah, so we
Yeah.
had dump trucks out there, two
Unless we wanna start our own
tractors, it's a
dump truck.
ton of equipment in diesel fuel, so it does make sense.
I was gonna make a pun about leaving, but I won't.
Yeah.
Leaving.
Okay, so, the regional opportunities, I mean, there's certainly more than this. We work through, the Lansing Economic Area Partnership. There's other things, there's other cooperatives, certainly NEAS has a regional effort, the library, et cetera, but like, two of the, like, I guess kind of like the physical ones, the Red Cedar Trail, River Trail Initiative, we reported on this before, we did get a grant. The contractor will start, they haven't already, well, they haven't been, because the river's been frozen, but soon they'll be able to start doing clearing on the river, so that's good. We went through an RFP process with, Meridian Township ran that portion for us. And really our involvement is, other than being part of that grant initiative and being a beneficiary of the service, there's nothing that we have to do as a community. We don't have a cost share. So that's pretty cool. And one of the newer efforts is a non-motorized regional path. That's really at the beginning stages. I was invited to a meeting with John Bowman, Keith Cray, a couple others to talk about how do we bring non-motorized to the area. And coming from a community which had, it was almost a quarter century effort to get that done. It's long. It's not necessarily costly because for our sake, we have our in-town network and, you know, we're not funding a trail from here to Okemos or a trail from here to Weberville or anything like that. We're one of the nodes that we want people to come to. And so it's important that we participate. And I'll let you know more about that as that develops. But there really isn't, it's basically, other than, you know, me participating in some meetings and maybe at some point if there's a regional grant effort that we would sign on for that. But they really are, both pathways really fit into not just quality of life for people that live here, but also for economic development. Because people will come and kayak because they have the facilities now. And if you can kayak all the way, you can, you know, come into town and kayak up to Dietz and come back and stop and go to lunch or whatever, and then they continue on. So a lot of cool things with regional and it's recreational as well. Just go briefly, I'll underscore briefly, with department updates, no scheduled 92s or welding leak backs or anything like that. So we'll start with the police department. Go ahead,
20
Chief.
seconds or less.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about staffing's exceptionally well. Equipment-wise, we purchased new handguns for the officers. In 2024, we had new rifles, new shotguns. I don't know what else to say.
Everything's going well.
Everything's going very well.
2 points for brief.
Yes.
Yes.
Pressure on me.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Come on, right?
Well, clerk
You can
and
do
clerk and
it.
treasurer's next.
Blocks, what we got?
Oh, yep, it's
Clerk is
Tom
next.
next. Oh, no, it's
Clerk's
Holly
next.
next.
So I did do a written report, so I'll just go over some highlights on it that I would like people to key in on. Under the elections, we have new equipment. The state let us know in January that they are starting to look at getting new equipment by 2027, which is very quick coming up. And they have told us to budget at least $15,000 per precinct. Currently, there is no state or federal funding to replace the equipment, and it would be decommissioned once the new equipment is in place, so we have no option of using the old equipment.
So this is 15,000 total or per piece of
Per
equipment?
precinct.
Okay. Per piece.
So we have 3 currently.
Okay.
You know what's motivating
No. They said, like, just plan to use this for 10 years and then we'll go from there, so.
that?
I mean, it's been 10 years, but you have to think, we only have elections every other year, you know, maybe 2, 3 a year, right, each of those years. So the equipment's not like used up, it's just, it's 10 years old and.
Think about
Sure.
validity of election or something,
No,
just whatever.
yep. And some of our equipment, I mean, we just got it this year, so I mean, it's only got 3 elections on it and they get 2 more, we have 5 uses before it's decommissioned.
When they say decommission, do they come and take it, or do we have, so we don't have the ability to check with
It doesn't matter, it's
It
gonna be
doesn't-
uncertified.
uncertified?
We would not be able
All right,
to
so they do
use
come
it
to get-
so.
all right.
We could get some money back, but because the state funded it, it's not like it would go to us, it would probably go towards, the purchase of the new equipment. But currently, we would be looking at $45,000 for elections. And, you know, if the funding comes available, great, but
Right.
we do have to look at that in the next 2 years, so.
Holly, would there be any addition, besides the actual machine cost of $15,000 per machine, so $45,000, is there going to be ancillary costs to that? Is there, you know, like the ballots that go through it, or, you know, anything like that that would be in addition to these machines?
Because I don't know what they're gonna be putting out there.
Okay.
I can't say at this time. Michigan, I feel like is still gonna be a paper ballot state for quite some time. So that, I don't think that costs. And probably my level. So, yeah, I can't say right now. They're gonna start demoing the equipment in as soon as this summer. So
Okay.
clerks will be
Sure.
looking at everything that they're gonna offer, and they're gonna start certifying these companies to be vendors for us. So,
My impression is that the other expensive thing here is paying for the poll workers. And you've got this plan here to maybe consolidate with other places because of the early polling and all that, that's probably a good idea.
we do have that option to partner with like the township. They have offered that, but we still have to have the equipment to take over there. And we would still have to pay for some of the workers and everything too. So some of our workers would work over there for them.
I don't normally like interject, but I do frequently. I'm gonna say this, I think, respectfully, I think I voiced my opinion before. If we're gonna do elections, our residents should vote in Williamston.
Correct.
We could, they should vote in Williamston.
Maybe we could partner with Williamston Township
And they
so
can-
that they can come in here.
Correct.
And, yeah. So we're gonna end up having to pay poll workers anyway to look at it.
Yeah.
Well, we do get reimbursed for a lot of these elections, like we just got checked for the November election, workers reimbursed. Like I turned in, and it's up to $15 per hour, so it's not 100% of what we pay them, but it is a big chunk of what we pay them. And we did get the reimbursement pretty timely this time, so I'm happy about that part.
Yeah, I don't often like dig heels in on things, but if we're gonna be in the election business, which we are,
We should do it.
our residents should vote here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the least we can do is have our residents, because that, it adds that I voted in a place that was not in the community that I live in, and it was not good.
So what that means is the big expense for the election thing is gonna be the 3 machines.
Yes,
Okay, got it.
and that's just Michigan, so. And I know folks across the state are probably cringing right now because they will not have that kind of funding.
That's a big expense.
Yeah, that's a big. Our current ones, I think we paid like $5,000 for, and I ended up having the state pay for those, so we didn't have to pay for them this past year.
Work your magic.
Yes. I am on the State Clerks Association board as well, so I do have some pull with some people. I do vote on our priorities and everything over there, so I think that'll be a big one. Board vacancies, we literally have one vacancy on every single board. So if you know people, please send them my way and we'll get them an application. But that's not terrible, to have one vacancy on each board, it's just very consistent. That we have one vacancy on every single board. We're still at about 70 FOIAs per year on average. We do have a lot of different filing systems with a lot of staff changes that we've had. We used to have McKenna in-house, and we've had assessors in-house, and we've had them not. We've contracted with them. We've had different building inspection services. So each of these people have had their own filing systems, and we're trying to figure out how we can maybe merge everybody's filing system into one property file that we can just access a little bit easier instead of trying to find things in different places. And that can help our FOIA process a lot better than what we're doing. Board training, I would encourage all of our members here to attend the upcoming training. We did a boards and commissions trivia night. Actually, Jeff Weiss, when he was a council member, he attended. It was really, really fun. We did do it on an evening, and we had pizza, and we had soda and water, and people just had a great time. We had buzzers, we had teams. I think it went over really, really well, and people were bringing back that information to me, like, oh, isn't this like supposed to be like this? And I'm like, yeah, you're right. And so I can tell people really got into the information a little bit better in that format. So we're going to do that again. Do probably the next couple months because it's the best time to do it before summer gets going and people are going. The annual cleanup day is coming up on April 12th. It is our second one. We're trying it for Saturday this year because it might be a little easier for the residents to get there. People are already registering, but if you can share it, I added a little flyer to your report. So it has all your information. They should register. If they don't, I don't think it's too bad, but they do have to be a city resident, and we will be checking that on the day of. But so far, so good.
Excellent, thank you. Mr. John?
Good evening all. I will try to keep this pretty brief, and in the essence of time, I'll try to focus on some of the things that you guys will probably be hearing about from us in the near future, so kind of just giving you a little heads up. Biggest one is the Earned Sick Time Act. I don't know how many you've been in the news a lot lately. Went into effect last Friday. On the 11th hour on Thursday, the legislation, Senate stuff, voted to make some significant changes to it. The original version of the act was very, very concerning to a lot of businesses, a lot of people, including us. Fortunately, with a lot of the changes, it's not going to be near as, I guess, troubling probably for us, but we will have to change our policy some, so we will be bringing that to you guys in the very near future, because I think we have 30 days to get it to you. The problem with them making those changes on Thursday is they just had a webinar out today at noon. That was from the the Department of Labor. And they said even they're still trying to sort through some of it. They've even got their attorneys working on some of the interpretation of it. So we're getting it to you and putting stuff together as quick as we can. And we'll be coming back to you with the policies on that. But I think our current time off benefit will comply with the majority of it. The only thing we'll have to look at is for part-time and seasonal.
When does it need to go into effect?
It went into effect
It's
last
in
Friday.
effect. Oh,
It's in
really?
effect, yeah, last Friday, exactly. Even though they haven't totally decided exactly what was supposed to be in effect.
Okay.
So we'll be coming to you with more on that soon, very soon. I just want a quick thing on property taxes. We're wrapping it up the 24th year. I bring it up because I know the city manager's mentioned a few times about us being financially good, sound shape here in Williamston. I had some preliminary talks with the assessors for 2025. They're kicking around at what they think about a 3.5% increase for the city of Williamston. So it's good, right? So we get, we may be affected a little bit with some heavily rollback, but the good news is we're continuing to increase a little bit, which is going to increase our revenues. So it's good news. One thing I did want to throw out real quick, just in case some of you hear this out on the street or whatever, we seem to be having an increasing number of instances where payments are coming in. There's quite a lag when people are putting them in the mail when they arrive, and by state statute, we don't have leeway on when we have to quit collecting them and stuff. And like, I think a lot of the confusion, people go to their online payments to their bank. And like, for example, we had one today, I'm not going to mention banks or anything, but it was a bank that has several branches here in Ingham County. People went online, did bill pay, and they don't always realize that the banks are just creating a check from a bill processing center. And two of them that came in today, one processing center was from Chicago, the other processing center was from South Dakota, even though the banks are local. So when they're processing the check and creating the check, put it in the mail, it could be 10 days or more before it gets to us. So it's creating a lot of problems. We're getting some, I won't say a lot. There are some instances where some people have been upset. We try to contact them right away, let them know so that it doesn't go to the county or whatever. We can give them courtesy, but it's becoming more and more of an issue with the mail, the way the sorting, has to go to Grand Rapids and get sorted. If you look on the U.S. Postal Service website, it says it's allowed 3 to 9 days for regular mail, so just something to be aware of. Also, just as a department, we just continue to look at, trying to keep our data secure, which often means, the computers and stuff and the operating software gets outdated and is no longer supported. So with that in mind, we'll have some stuff in the budget as we go forward for increasing, whether we do it this fiscal year or the next fiscal year, we'll get it worked out to where we're compliant, because I know with the operating software we're on right now, we're being told will not be supported after October of this year. So we're working at getting things up to date, also looking at enhanced security with our data storage, and also with looking at more convenient ways for customers to pay and stuff as we go forward. So all these will, like I said, bring to your attention as we move forward. So that's all I've got. Unless anybody's got questions.
You're up.
All right, I'll move quickly.
Thanks. Okay.
You already talked about the leap sucker. What else is there to say?
Quickly, just want to say we've had 3 WMBs. We've had several small snowstorms that used up quite a bit of our salt rather quickly. We still have some left. I mean, we're not out, so hopefully it looks like we're going to make it through the rest of the winter.
I know you mentioned it earlier. What's the WMD?
WMB, water main break.
Oh, okay, got it.
If you say it really fast, it doesn't count.
We're superstitious.
It's a weapon of mass destruction.
Yes, there you go.
I'm getting confused.
But we are looking forward to wrapping up the winter, looking forward to parks, mowing, hydrant flushing, street cleaning, our normal work. Some of the programs that I've been working on, and our water superintendent is cellular water meters. They seem to be going to that. Well, everybody kind of is going to that. It's relatively new, but it's just real-time readings. You can read them at the office. You get the software. There's no big buy-in to it. You just buy the meters and move on as you replace them. You can get them real-time readings, leak detection, and the homeowner themselves can get in and look at their meter. And they can see the same things if they have a leak in their home. It can help them troubleshoot it. But anyways, we're looking at a pilot program to start that off with. John and I have been talking about it. And like I said, that's the way of the future. I'm updating the safety program, the mandatory training. We got to get back on bloodborne pathogens, first aid, CPR. COVID kind of killed all that. I need to work with Chief Weiss and the fire department to see what kind of training is available we can jump on board with. And sidewalk program kind of ran out of time this fall. I just started in June, and I was trying to put something together, but we were just basically running to the complaints that we had. But how we're going to do that is we're going to start in the middle of town and work our way out. Unless we get a work order that says, hey, we got a big problem we're going to report. Of course, I'll jump to that. And we're just going to go as money holds out, probably do 2 pours a year, spring and fall, and we'll just keep working out until we catch up with it. And that's all I have.
That was good.
That was great.
So if we have 15 miles of streets, we have 30 miles of sidewalks.
Give or take, that's a good assumption.
It's a resident, I think that's a long sidewalk.
So but we have an ordinance in place that if a resident basically demands that their sidewalk be replaced or wants to, that there is a 50% cost share for that.
Okay.
However, and that's another longer policy and philosophical discussion that we need to have, because in my opinion, that isn't working so well because a lot of our network is really, really outdated.
It's old.
And so and the other thing too, try and be cautious, because the easiest thing in the world is to blame the folks that come before, and that things didn't happen, and that suddenly, now we're all here to save the day. And I don't think that at all. What's changed is I think our council has changed. I think your priorities have sharpened, and I think that we're in a better financial shape. One, it's your good stewardship, but it's also the prosperity of the community. So we have resources to tackle these issues now, where we didn't have that before. I mean, the DDA couldn't, like, do a parking lot because they didn't have any money. And it wasn't anybody's fault. It was just the valuations aren't what they are now, and that goes across the board. I mean, our treasurer mentioned about 3.5%. So that's a long-winded answer, and I apologize. We need to start with the sidewalk network and just start making our way. It's much like streets. We can't just say, the project is too enormous and we just like can't do it. And you know, there's the vestiges of, we have a concrete trailer where the city, once upon a time, used to do sidewalks. That's okay. I mean, in this day and age, it's probably not the most efficient. But anyway, that's another one of those issues we're going to continue to, you know, work our way from middle out. And that's the oldest part of town is in the middle, you know, as you work your way out. That's the methodology. So that kind of leads us to the open discussion and recap. Council, anything? And I'm gonna pull up Tammy. I'm gonna call on Dan Rhines. Anything that we didn't cover, or something that you want to see in the coming year, or you need more or less information, less PowerPoints?
You know, I think we covered a lot tonight. Couple of things, like we know we're going to cover a lot of this as we get into master plan and zoning and things, but I know as we were talking about possible development, we still have some areas that are still zoned mainly office. I wonder how productive that is, and I know we're going to get into that more later, but that's just one thing that popped up when we were talking about that, because you know how many big businesses are looking to open a large office complex. That was one thought.
I'm pleased to see the emphasis on roads. That's a really important thing. Looks like we've got a really good handle on it, too.
Hey, that property behind the senior center, commercial, we want to rezone it maybe? You know, I know what people don't like, I guess it's a fence around your senior housing, things of that nature, but we have a senior center, and maybe we should kind of, you know, who's going to build a commercial back there? I mean, you know what I mean, for you know, the way we're trekking. So that was a thought, and the old barn we turned down, is it barn, like a barnwood? I mean,
Yes.
people buy that, that's worth a lot of money, so maybe you want to look into that, some of that, when you peel that off, you could probably sell that for a pretty penny, and to, you know, so that's just not a thought.
Right.
It's a good thought. We've talked about that. Typically what happens is you get the cost of the demo covered. The company takes the barn away, and rather than us having to sell it, that's how it works. So you basically get the demo for the structure for free. But that is a good thought, yeah. And there is some value. You can get beyond what may or may not be lead paint and all kinds of other things in it. So, but yeah, that is a good thought. And we try and find those little opportunities when we can.
Right, we have in the past tried to do that.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's timing and everything, when they can get at it, and your schedule, and so.
I love hearing that we're gonna put more emphasis on our sidewalks, because I think that's super important, if we're gonna be a walkable community, and we're talking about these non-modal trails and how we connect our neighborhoods and everything, so I am very, very happy about that. I think tonight was fabulous, so that's it. Next month's member.
Yeah, two things on my mind. When I was driving here, I was looking at the huge amount of space with the front of the senior center, and I was thinking like maybe a woods with a trail, so they could like come out of the senior center and like have a place to walk around. It would be really cool, it would be visually beautiful instead of just space. And the second thing that I'd like to see, let's get aggressive about public art. I'd like to see people come into Williamston and go, oh my God, this is cool, and that's part of it.
Well, on the second point, you know, art can really, you know, without the city making a huge, or even just a minor investment, the city can really, enhance that segment of what we do, and there is an economic driver behind that. Not that everything has to be about economics, but if by adding art you can bring more people to town, I think that's a good idea. I know the mayor mentioned it at a previous council meeting about the possibility of an arts commission. I think that's a good, or an arts committee. I think that's certainly worth looking into, and that was on one list of one of the things. One other thing, we didn't touch on this one, but it'll be relevant to everybody as you drive home tonight. My mom was in healthcare, and she says, you never want to be an interesting case. Like, our light poles, we're an interesting case.
Oh, you mean our two-colored light poles?
And there's a reason behind that. And, it took me, 3 years and thousands of hours of research and several people at DTE to figure this out, and figured it out with Ray's help and Ann Casper's help. The yellowish lights, those are old, they're combination, they're metal halide, they're mercury. They're not LEDs. And I don't think any of you made this decision, but the lights that are ours, primarily like in and around the DDA, those are not LEDs, the yellow ones. The white ones that have been replaced over time, the white and the ornate poles, those are LEDs. But we've been talking to DTE. We've been paying a service charge for the lights that we own. And we have an inventory, one of the bays in the barn is an inventory of light poles. So at some point, we decided to get into the light pole business. And so we maintain those. So the South Putnam lights, if those go bad, we have to either fix them ourselves or we hire Carl Osterley does a lot of electric, so we have to engage him to do that. DTE will maintain those. If we make that change, one, the lights will finally be uniform. They'll be all the same color. The globes are a little different than we have now, but, I mean...
We just need more light.
So can I just say, when I first got on the council, I want to go on the record right now, when I first got on the council, that was one of my biggest complaints, was why couldn't we have the same color light bulbs? And I was told it was all on DTE, it had nothing to do with us. Now I'm finding out that, thank you for having a conversation, to figure this out, that we can have this fixed.
I know a frightening amount about
Stop
street
paying a
lights.
surcharge.
Yeah, we gotta give us that.
Well,
charge, yeah.
but
We can burn it
no,
up, no charge.
we're going to pay it, but that means when it breaks,
They fix it.
We call them and they fix it. I mean, the other thing, the energy savings, I mean, there's an upfront, and it's not hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's like 29 or 30,000, give or take, to change them. We pay for the energy anyway, and we pay the service charge anyway. So we'll get the lights changed out, and we'll bring that to all of you. And again, there's some upfront cost, and there's some time that goes with that. But that will finally, put that to rest, and our energy costs will be less. I mean, I think you pointed out the other day during accounts payable about how much we pay.
When I mentioned to people, just sort of casually passing on this, what's going on with the city council stuff? I'm looking at the accounts payable, we spend $9,000 a month on city lights, the electricity from the city lights. Everybody I say that to goes, oh?
Well, this is just funny though, but when Brandon flies home at night and happens to have a window seat, he knows he's getting closer to home because he looks down and it's an arrow. It's a gold or a white arrow with a gold top. When you see it from over and you see all the city lights and the two different colors, it is. It's because of the way Grand River comes up and you've got South Putnam and then so it's like this white arrow with a gold tip.
So that's clearly what they have in mind.
Oh, absolutely. So my husband knew he was on his way home.
Excellent work.
Hey, real quick, I just thought of something, we're pretty dead around here in the winter, right? So Plymouth has the ice sculptures. So instead of people going to Plymouth, why don't we do an ice sculpture event to bring people in our town?
We had one way back. It was a February. It was the coolest thing ever. Holly was a part of the organizing group for it. It was a 3-day event?
It was a chamber event,
But it was awesome.
Maybe just a couple winter events to bring people.
Right, and now it's getting colder again.
So that is on the events planning radar.
Yeah.
And we
Just
talked
to
about
do
that.
like a winter
We talked
fest.
about that last week, and I reminded them, we only have 11 months and 2 weeks to
To
get
get-
our February event planned.
For our winter fest for next year, yeah.
So we have some, we are definitely going to do something next February, maybe in conjunction with Restaurant Week. That's another event that's coming. So, and that's direct feedback from a restaurant owner who's on the DDA, two of them,
Yeah.
that this is their typically their slowest time other than Valentine's Day.
And nobody around this area, and we're like getting into the weeds, but nobody around this area does a restaurant week. Like the bigger cities and everything, and we have, what did Carrie say? We have like 26
Yeah,
different food establishments in Williamston, whether it's fast food,
right.
coffee shops, or fine dining.
And
So how many years ago was the sculpture thing?
Oh gosh, Holly, what was it, early 2000s?
10 years ago or
Yeah, probably like early 2000s, like
20?
yeah, so, yeah, I mean, a really, really good one. We've had, the Chamber's done like a 4-corner ice carving deal, but it wasn't as cool as the original ice carving. There was what, like 20-some different ice carving stations, all the businesses sponsored them. But you could go so much bigger with having like big ice stuff in McCormick Park and having, you know, the great big sculptures like some of these places do. Arts Council.
so there will be ice and there will be curling, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
Maybe modified, it won't be Olympic quality, but next year is Winter Olympic year, so that's the other thing.
And we have some mud ice arena benches that we need to install and use around our
That's right.
ice rink.
Yep.
So I'm thinking walk your monkey in the winter.
Chi-chi winter walk.
You just branded next February. Scott, you're a genius.
Yep, bring your
So,
monkey.
I'm not gonna go through these, but just for Tim, who's the newer member of council. You will get a draft budget at the first meeting in April. We don't really discuss it then, and then we have our budget work sessions where we go through all of the numbers for things at 2 different meetings, the 12th and the 27th. We have a public hearing, and then our budget's adopted in June. So. But this is online and in your packet. And this is basically the same calendar, just, adjusted that, the days are a month or a little different. So, that's all I have tonight.
Jerry, you survived.
Good job. Internet.
Before break, what do you guys think about having a meeting here?
I liked it. This is a nice space. Do we have to pay for it or do they volunteer to us?
If we pay,